everyone, it's Skylar here. I'm an autosexual transgender woman documenting my experience in a conservative Christian group called Freedom Group. Welcome to my series on freedom groups at the chapel. The theme of these videos is really about my emotional journey through figuring out how to be a part of this community, or at least understand their perspectives. I hope to encourage people to see the value in staying open-minded, even in challenging environments. If you're new to the series, please make sure to check out my previous episodes and don't forget to like and subscribe. So this week is going to be a little bit more of a juicy episode. Last week on Thursday, I got a random text message from the leaders. Not all of them, just two of them that are a little bit older, married couple that are really the senior leaders of this group. They sent me a fairly generic text message that was something like, "It's great to have you as part of the Freedom Group. It's been such a transformational process." So they're really just opening up with a fairly generic text on just how it's been great to have me in the Freedom Group. And that as a corollary to that, they wanted to get to know me a little bit better. And so being my natural social self, I was like, oh, this is great. It's nice that the leaders are checking in with the participants here. And this makes sense. This goes with why, I think, it's good that, that they're doing this. And this must be what makes Freedom Group such a renowned experience, hearing such high regards about how great this is. So I, wasn't totally expecting it at first, but I was like, okay, this makes sense. Cool. I'm glad they're doing this. And so I responded and it was just yeah, okay, sounds good. When do you want to hang out? I proposed a time range. I was like, I'm free on Sunday, pretty much all the afternoon, thinking okay, this seems like a good ideal time because, after the services, and then we could meet and, just hang out during the afternoon on Sunday. That seems like a good time. And then it starts to get a little bit more awkward. So I find out they won't be available all weekend and that they want to meet with me tomorrow at 3:00. This would have been Friday at 3:00. And I'm just huh? Okay. That's a little weird. Why so sudden? That was already a little bit of a red flag right there. I was like, okay, that's a little weird. That's just so quick and abrupt. And so either way though, there was no way I couldn't get out of my job to go meet with them. I had important meetings then. So it was all right. Okay, well, they did say at the very end of their text, if that doesn't work, we can meet next week. So I was like, okay, well, seems like the normal thing to do here would just be to propose a time for next week. So that's what I do. I'm just okay, well, I can't meet tomorrow and you all are gone all weekend. And so let's just see if we can meet up Tuesday or Wednesday in the middle of the week next week. So I threw out a couple of times thinking that would be easier and, actually makes more sense for setting something up. And then things went from a 0 to 100 super fast. They replied that actually they needed to meet with me before the next Freedom Group session. And in that same text, they were we really care about your heart and this whole process of me being in this group. So that was it. Once they said that, I knew immediately right there and then, that, this was about me being trans. It was just very clear. There was no way around it. That is the only possible explanation for why they're doing this. I mean, why else would they say these kind of strange things and insist on seeing me before the next session? It was just so dramatic and all of those things. It was just wow, okay, why are you doing this? So, we resolved though that we could arrange a time right before the Freedom Group session. So I would just come 30 minutes. Actually, it was an hour earlier than when the Freedom Group actually officially started. So, okay. I was okay, yeah, sure. That works for me. I can do that. So over the weekend though, I literally could not stop thinking about this. I was gosh, how are they going to confront me? Are they going to be mad at me? Is this the moment where they're going to ask me to join the men's little subgroup once we start breaking out into smaller groups? And how did they find out that I'm trans? Who actually told them? And so I really I couldn't stop thinking about these questions. And so like my natural response is just to be like, how can I mentally prepare my responses, like my position on these things ahead of time, to kind of like, use the energy productively, at least as best I could. And I guess like ultimately I resolved that if I was asked to join the boys, I decided I would say yes, like sure, if that's, if that's what they feel like they need me to do, then I guess I signed up for this knowing this was going to kind of happen to some extent, or at least a good chance of it. So I said, I was thinking in my mind, yeah, sure, I'll join the boys. I mean, to say the least, it's not what I wanted, absolutely was not what I wanted. But I didn't care if they would have that take on things really, because I kind of expected it when I signed up for this group. I mean, I'm like joining a Christian group that's going to make me hang out with men. It's kind of like, I feel like I'm a masochist for myself in this process, like just bringing on pain, like as I'm going through this, but that's sort of what the point of it is. So, okay, whatever. But what I didn't expect in all of this is how confrontational this felt like this was, and how early in this happened. I was like, just kind of thinking to myself, dang, somebody really spilled the beans really pretty early. And then it hit me in that moment. I was like, wait a second. I remembered that the pastor who's like in charge of overseeing these freedom groups, actually already knows that I'm trans. So like, I can't remember how exactly this person knows, but like, I just knew that they knew. And, like this lead pastor knew, over these groups, and that like, somewhere along the way, like, that's, he had found out, and this was years back, I think more when I was early in transition, and I was just like, oh, wait a second, that connects. Like, that's definitely how they know. Besides the fact that like I have family literally in the leadership team of this church. And, so like, honestly, them finding out from some source would just be like a hop, skip, and a jump away. Like it'd be super easy for them to know. And it's no surprise that, I guess I already kind of knew that they knew, because the girl like the week before had already like started using my name every single second, even though the week before that she had just naturally talked to me a lot more seamlessly, which is saying like pronouns for me as she and her, like, okay, great. Like whatever you need to do, like honestly, I don't care that much, but it is kind of weird. And like, it's very obvious to me as just someone interacting with someone, when that dynamic shifts and they start using my name like perpetually, and it's just kind of awkward, but it's like, okay, I get it. Like, and that's an issue for you to some extent, it seems. So whatever. But ultimately, like when I signed up for this group, I knew this was bound to happen. Like, again, this wasn't really anything crazy. It was just how it happened, how it unfolded. That was a little bit of a surprise to me. I didn't expect that. And like the whole thing about joining the boys, like, I mean, originally I didn't want any of that drama in the first place. Like I had specifically sought out this group, this mixed gender group, hoping that I would dodge that, to some extent. But after it was announced during like the intro sessions, well, I had to make the decision I could start like thinking about that decision on how I would cope with this challenge, whatever. And then like additionally, like being, thinking I'm going to have to join the boys group, I was sort of like thinking ahead of time, like, well, it could be interesting to see how they react to me. I mean, see what things they'll talk about or bring up in that like little group, and see if I'm like a disruption to the dynamics. And I figured like, no matter what, it's going to be amusing to me, like as just an observer in it. And the best part is like, I wouldn't really feel guilty about it if I'm asked to join them. I can't really be like accused of being a burden in this process, because that's where they funneled me. So that kind of takes some of that like burden off of me, which is kind of nice. And like just absolves me of feeling guilty about like disrupting the dynamics. Hopefully I wouldn't. And I don't really, I guess I don't think I necessarily would. Maybe I would, especially as I start sharing like my struggles with like, I don't know, not being like, I guess, promiscuous to some extent. And then like, not letting boys be like interference for my marriage, which is another issue. But again, if they want me in the boys group, like then, that's the kind of stuff that I would kind of look to share, at least if I'm being honest about things. So, again, it's just kind of like an interesting dynamic. But like, so Also, though, if I do go to join the boys, like that would have this unfortunate reality of just outing me to the group ahead of like my comfort timeline, like what I would like otherwise plan for this. And so this is like the reality that's setting in is I'm like, okay, like I'm just going to have to deal with the fact that people are going to know I'm trans just on the basis of me going into this boys group, right? Like, and I mean, that's just what they'd have to assume. Like, why else would I be there? That's just weird. And it would just be weird. And I mean, it goes without saying that like nobody basically in my regular life knows that I'm trans, like especially like, well, at least the people that have met me since transition, which now has been like quite a number of years. So it's, you know, it's very much fair to say that like most people just don't know, especially like, you know, in where I work and things like that, like there, no one knows. And so it's just like not a big deal. And, you know, yeah, it's just like, okay. And honestly, if people did know, like, wow, they do an incredible job hiding it because I literally can't tell a difference. And there's literally no difference in their behavior if they know. So like, okay, then it's beside the point. I don't really care, honestly. And I think it's good because it's part of why like I'm able to be so chill about a lot of this stuff is because like I don't get any kind of like cognitive dissonance out of the treatment of me, except for in these high energy spaces where like gender is just so much of a fixation and like an emphasis on how people are treated, which is really in these religious circles, which is like so sad to say, but it's like, okay, whatever, you know, again, that's why this is so challenging for me. And like, I'm not going to lie and say like, I don't have any type of neurotic tendencies. Like, sure, I think everyone kind of struggles to some extent with like neurosis of some kind when it comes to like social anxiety. Like I definitely have social anxiety and that got a lot worse from COVID, like just to be honest, but it's not enough of a thing that like, I think it like defines me at all. Like it's absolutely something that's just in the background and like I work through like anyone else would. And that's very much like something I feel, you know, I guess I'm similar to a lot of people in that way, especially women, that otherwise deal with like, you know, societal expectations and not meeting up to that or like beauty standards and feeling like they're not performing femininity to that extent. But, you know, it's just, it's different for everyone too. So, you know, it's like it takes form in a different way or not. Imposter syndrome is a very common one that like I absolutely relate with or have related with in the past. But like ultimately, I think it's easy for me to manage on with my life as a trans woman, mostly because of my voice. Like it's just not very masculine. And so I'm able to sort of just blend in and like, just seamlessly exist. And like, I didn't even do any voice training. So it's just like, I'm just lucky that I don't have that issue of being like locked in with a deeper voice like some trans women have, which is just, you know, my heart kind of goes out to them, but it also is like, oh, you know, good luck, you know, with navigating that because that's the number one way people know your gender is through your voice, through the way you hold yourself and conduct yourself. And so it's just, you know, something to just be aware of, you know, when you're going into transition. And I think that when they don't get perceived as women, they're like a lot more, there can be more sensitivity to that, I guess. And that can lead you to be more obsessive about the way you're perceived, which again is like not a great thing, I think, but you know, just sort of what happens, or can happen in the dynamics of transition. So anyways, back to this whole thing. Yeah, I spent the weekend pretty nervous about this little meeting. I really didn't like how it was sort of approached in the text messages, to be perfectly honest. For starters, I didn't like the messaging, how it went from like casual to we need to meet ASAP. That was just like, it just immediately made me feel a little distrusting about what are their real intentions here. And like, that was a little weird to me, but also like, again, trying to exercise grace. Like this is an extenuating circumstance. I'm sure most of the leaders, even the experienced ones in freedom groups, have probably never had before. So, you know, extending that grace, not trying to exert judgment. But that was something that I thought was like, I really wish they had just been upfront about it and just been like, we need to meet with you before the next freedom group. That would have cut out a lot of that noise and sort of like misleading distrust in that. But the other thing that was weird to me is I got this message from two people. So it was again, a married couple of leaders. And I was like, why am I getting hit with 2 people instead of just 1? Like, so that's already like a 2v1 situation. And that's also not making me feel very comfortable here. I'm like outnumbered from the start. And that just makes me feel kind of scared. I mean, I'm just being honest on that. Like, that was just a little weird to me. And so, like, needless to say, I was feeling pretty intimidated already, like, just kind of going into this. And like, I even had a couple of times where like I woke up at night and I was like hard to fall back to sleep if this came on my mind. And it did come on my mind quite a bit. And like, honestly, it was pretty crazy how like this happened. I honestly couldn't remember the last time I had put so much thought and energy, emotional energy into anything. Like, being kept up at night is not something that's happened to me since my transition. And so like, that was so like crazy to me. And I'm just like, wow, this is really anxious, but also more opportunities for me to turn to God and sort of, trust in him and pray to him about like absolving me of this anxiety, which, definitely helped. But it honestly, the real root of it is just confronting. It's just having this confrontation happen and get it over with. And to that extent, I was like, yeah, Monday cannot come soon enough, please. Like, I just want to be free of this dread. And I know that having this happen is the antidote for it. So let's hurry up and get there. So finally, okay, fast forwarding now, Monday comes around and like on the way over and I'm just driving, I'm like praying and praying. Like, this is like, I mean, again, I had already been praying all weekend about this. Like, oh my gosh, this is scary. But now in the car, I would call this like stress praying. Like, this was like, I am just firing off words and thoughts from my stream of consciousness. And like, I mean, it's just, the energy is just there. Like, I am just like going at it. Like, God, help me not like, I don't know, help me like have the right like disposition towards like, accepting what they're saying and like not challenging them or like being confrontational back. Like, it just like, I was just taking all that negative energy and anxiety and channeling it right to God, which was like, this is what like Christianity really is about, right? Like, it's about taking those struggles and channeling them. The problems come up when you don't have a lot of struggles. Like, that's how it feels, like, at least in my life. And I'm just like, okay, I need to like figure that out. And that's part of this freedom group experience for me. But in this moment, driving there, I was just directing my negative energy, and like, it was just felt so weird. I'm like, I'm so scared to talk to people that are otherwise well-meaning, well-intentioned, and nice to me. But I just know that, like, unfortunately, the scriptures are not sufficient. Like, God and Jesus are not sufficient to tell you how to handle the nuances of life like this, for example. And you need experience. You need input, you need feedback. Like, you need additional sources of truth to make sense and seamlessly navigate something in the most effective manner. I'm a full believer in that. And so I was about to live this. I'm like, I'm just going to be the guinea pig for these 2 leaders to kind of like figure out how to go through this. And they're going to do their best to explain things to me. And, I don't have all the answers, and I'm extending grace, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to like have my own thoughts and opinions and my own critiques on how all this is being handled. And that's part of why I'm hoping to do this experience, is to help give that feedback and input to whoever's listening to help understand how to like approach this more gently and sensitively, with future, LGBT participants, because I think this extends to even gay and lesbian people. Absolutely. It's true that it extends to them. There's a lot of similarities here. So like, I just remember telling myself in the car, like, just prepare to be disrespected, prepare to be treated in the worst ways imaginable, so that like, when you get there and they actually do treat you, I guess, potentially better than what I'm imagining, it won't feel so bad. And that was like, okay, yeah, like, that's the right way, set the lowest expectations so that things are like middle tier when you get there. So I pull up and they're already there. So I'm like, okay, get my stuff together. And like, I go up to them and I'm imagining we're gonna go inside and talk. But ironically, they don't have keys to the building. So we just go over to the side, like over off to the side, still visible from where we parked. And just like, we had a little prayer, and then we kind of jump into things and start talking. And the first thing that like, literally right after we prayed, like immediately I get a directed question at me from one of the leaders that was like, okay, how did I come to know Jesus as my Lord and Savior? Like, literally right off the bat, straight question. And I mean, whoa, it's been years since a question like this has been asked to me. And like, I mean, I was like, okay, this is so weird. Like, you mean we met early so we could come over and then so you could just like, both of you could corner me and then ask me this question about my faith. So I was absolutely not comfortable, right? Like, we know this. So what happens when I'm not comfortable? I give answers that I don't genuinely like, they don't genuinely reflect like everything in my, I guess, in how I would frame things, right? Because I don't have the energy to put into framing because I'm so overcome by noise of how like I'm feeling. So I give answers that are sort of like more enclosed and more directed at what the question is, trying to satisfy like the curiosity of the questioner, doing my best to do it in a way that balances both the framing and what I'm going to say. And so like, and so that's what happens. So like, and I'm non-confrontational. So that's like, again, a weakness for me that I'm trying to like work through with this experience. And so like naturally though, what happens is I just go with the standard answer of how I came to faith at like the little milestones I have, that like, I don't think they don't do a good job of characterizing my journey because it's so much more nuanced in like the emotional state of how I would be like, explaining my relationship with God at different points in my life. But I basically was just like, well, I first came to faith when I was 8 years old. And, I prayed the prayer of salvation. That was the first time. And then when I was 15 or 14, somewhere around there, I reflected on that and said, like, maybe that was just to please my parents. Honestly, a lot of my childhood, I think, is most accurately looked at through that lens, as much as I don't like to say that. But I was really wanted to be a good kid and really wanted to make my parents happy and wanted to please those around me. I mean, that was like embedded in my psyche. People pleaser. Like, that is so me. And that's what happened in this environment. But 14, 15, I came to sort of like try to claim the faith as my own, which again is ironically also people pleasing. But I think I did have some genuine level of trying to like embody this, particularly when I wanted to be baptized. Okay, so that was sort of what answer I gave him, and that also like during college I kind of drifted away and had been that way up until the spring, where I've been trying to spark a renewal. God sort of like intervened in my life a little bit and gave me a sense of renewal in my purpose towards him and those types of things. So I said, okay, that's just how I'm going to kind of go about this answer. And so that's what I said. But really, in full disclosure, I don't like this question a lot, and I think the answer I would give is a lot more nuanced about like how I sort of struggled with God a lot when I was going to transition, and dealing with like, how do I reconcile this, until I realized that that's just making the whole thing harder. And I was like, I can't really make a good rational decision. I can't figure out myself well if I have this noise of faith constantly weighing on me. And so that's where I kind of just like put things to the side and navigated things without thinking so much about God and Jesus every single day, going through this process and looking at choices more in a cause and effect lens, to try to like make sense of how I thought about things and what would be best for me in transition, to manage my dysphoria. And so, yeah, I think like really, basically anyways, I answer it from that perspective about all those things. And keeping in mind too, that when I went to college, I was very much like a Christian warrior trying to convert people to Jesus, or at least with that mindset. And it wasn't until college that I started to like figure out I don't know everything. And actually there's a lot more that I don't know that I thought I knew, and sort of had this way of like reevaluating my framework for how I thought about faith and Christianity and how I thought about the worldview and secularization and all those types of things, because I was finally getting multiple lenses that were, I think, doing a much better defense of those alternative viewpoints than the one I had grown up with in this like insular bubble of a Christian school and whatnot. So all of that was sort of going on. It's a very common experience, I think, for people to go through that. And so like I talk about that. But then, when it comes to the spring, again, Blaise Pascal, what he says about the God-shaped hole in every human heart sort of resonated with me in a way that was like, we live our best lives when we think we're here for a purpose. And so like, even if I'm like have mixed feelings about Christianity and like I really struggle with believing in some of the tenets of the fundamentalism viewpoint, Like personally, I just can't get behind a couple of them. Like the Bible is inerrant, which to me is basically saying your interpretation of the Bible is can't be challenged. That's sort of like what that seems to me. And then the second piece is like that Christians are fundamentally a different type of person because God's like faith, or like faith in God has created a stronger Holy Spirit that makes them more like holier than thou. And it's like, I just don't have the I don't know, the pride to really like see that. And I also don't see that personally. I think it's a lot more nuanced in the decisions that are made. But again, okay, coming back to this though, so I struggle with those things, but I'm not going to get into all that. I can't get into all that. It's just about like getting through this moment with them. And so that's where my focus is. So I paraphrase the story of my faith to them and my journey. And then things kind of turn around again when they say like, oh, they like admit that they know my story, which is basically their way of saying that they know I'm trans without saying it, which I think is kind of funny, but it's basically leading into this next thing that's like, I am a problem for the group because I am a unique situation for the group. And I know it's going to go this way. I already know this. Like I knew they knew, but I wanted to see them kind of, bring it up because they're the ones trying to bring it up to me. And so they do that. And so I'm not going to go off into all the details, but basically they then segue into how freedom is about issues of the heart and not external things, and that how that translates to me having value and everyone having value, which I thought was very strange because I'm like, it's not about things of the external appearance, about issues of the heart. But then like, okay, well, first of all, are you insinuating that my transition is this very superficial thing that's just about my like appearances? Sure, that's what medical transition does, but there's a lot more underneath the surface of that like extends forward. So I thought that was a little offensive. Like I know that's not what they meant, but that was sort of what they were implying. And again, they really were doing their best to navigate this, but that was like just it didn't sit well with me. But again, I'm like too much in the moment of like, I'm so uncomfortable that I'm just shoving away these emotions like completely. And I'm just focusing on what they're saying so that I can respond as like, positively as I can. And it just was like, oh, okay. So I'm, it's just a lot going on. My heart is pounding this whole time. And it's like so annoying to me, but that's just how it's going. And so they further go on to hash out in two key parts. Number one was that the people in the group would be shocked, completely shocked, to find out that I'm trans if they were to find out later on, and that the leaders would be blamed if they knew this and let it happen. Okay, I see it. So basically they didn't want to betray the trust of other members who I guess they're insinuating like that they really value biological sex integrity, which again, okay, that makes sense. I mean, this group is like a bunch of conservatives. Of course, that's probably how they see things. And that like it would betray their trust if they knew that I was trans and let me go into like the females group. Okay, I get it. Like, again, fair enough. I see you don't want to be at risk of betraying trust of these members. That's like failing as leaders, I guess. And that like, especially because the women would like, they're expecting them to open up about things like trauma and, experiences that I guess are uniquely female, to some extent. Although I challenge that too, because I'm like, guys can definitely suffer things that are trauma based. I mean, I know like I have very personal connections, like, or I guess not personal connections, but like I've heard from guys straight up about being like, assaulted and abused in those ways. And, so I don't think it's uniquely female in that regard, but I get what they're saying. And it's like, I'm going to respect what they're saying more than I'm going to project that I'm right in this situation. So I was just like, okay, I get it. Like, no problem. These women may not want to open up if they know there's a biological male there, even though I'm really one to think that the signals of what that person's experienced, or not signals, but like the vibes you get from the person around you is what really matters. But again, I'm not one to make that judgment call, and I'm going to respect what they think. So I said, okay, got you. That makes sense. I'm not used to that. I did admit that. Because I've been in fairly open-minded spaces most of the time. I mean, that's where trans people are more accepted and more likely to thrive, in those environments. But again, this is about challenge and listening to other people that think differently. So I was like, okay, I respect that. And then the second piece was that the church curriculum itself for freedom was fundamentally divided by biological sex. And that made sense. I completely already saw that coming because it comes out of the South, a church in the South. So of course it's based in biological sex. And the way they see it is not going to be from the lens of like, your transition is sort of affirming your true identity and who God made you to be. They're going to take the lens that your physical body, the biological phenotype from that is what God intended you to be. So, you could look at it from either lens, really. I mean, I think there's a lot of nuances, but they're going to cut out the nuances and take a egalitarian approach of all treatment for one category type of thing. So that's what was happening here. And, but then they correlated with that they needed to protect the sacred covenant, this division by biological sex and the sacred covenant. And that was honestly the thing I disagreed with the most in all of this, because whenever something is made sacred, all rationality goes out the window. You can't challenge something that's sacred. It's a fundamentally ideological term to view something as sacred. It's like uniquely special in this space of, again, no criticality. You just can't challenge something that's sacred. That's the point, is that it's like connected to God. God has like made it pure in a way that you can't criticize that. You can't touch it. So, okay. Now I'm like, all right, sacred covenant. All right, I'm about to be asked to join the men's group on that, because there's no way, again, already in this confrontation, this was the moment where it was either I leave the group or I go to the men's group. Like, I knew it was going this way, and now it's finally happened. Again, a lot more ahead of the timeline I was expecting, because this is only the third meeting. And so I was like, okay, wow, this really, again, escalated quickly. But I guess, I was already committing to it. So I was like, okay, whatever. And so sure enough, the very next thing they say is that, yeah, they're indicating to me that I need to go to the men's group if I want to continue this experience. And so, like, again, even though I disagreed with some of their takes, particularly that people would be upset at them for letting me in the women's group and that it's a sacred division on biological sex, I think that's like, again, that's like a fundamentalist talking too much. But again, like, all right, like, I'm always going to come back to the fact that it's their group. I'm going to respect what they want. I'm not here to cause drama. I hate drama. I hate drama. I hate conflict. This whole thing is so like antithetical to my type of preferred existence, that I'm just going to kind of go with what they're saying and cause the least drama by going in the men's group, because that's what they want me to do. And so like, they were very much like, we just don't want you to leave. We really want you to stay. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, like, I got you. And like, I was already getting those messages earlier, but like, because I think in the text messages, they had said something like, we want you to know that you're loved. And again, I don't want to say like they're gaslighting me. That's not their intention, but that's the preparation. That's like, goes right into the idea of love bombing. We love you, we value you, and then they abuse you because it gives you a license to do that. Like, it's so unfortunate that that's how that kind of comes off, but that's very much what I was feeling and very much what I was seeing in this. But again, this is about challenging my comfort zone. This is about going further. So I'm going to just do what they say, and I'm going to go that route and do my best to not see things from that lens, because again, that's not the right way to think about this, I think. And I don't think ultimately that was their intention, but that is absolutely someone who's experienced in these types of dynamics with churches is going to see that for what it is right away. And they're going to look at it that way, even if that's not what's meant. So you got to be really careful about saying things like you are loved and you are valued, when it's not backed up by the way that the actions are actually supporting. And I think that's something was really obvious to me in this situation. And again, I already knew the church wasn't affirming. So I was able to kind of perceive this news really well going into this. And I also fundamentally did agree too that neither group was going to fit me perfectly, because as a trans woman, I have experience in both gender groups. Like, I have my left foot in the guy experiences of like everything up until I was like 23, 24, and then my right foot in the experiences more typical to females in social dynamics. And so like, and I guess I would say like on the left, my left foot, I would say like that foot is standing on male socialization, those experiences, the power of peer pressures, competitiveness, video games. I know I'm hitting kind of on stereotypes here. Obviously, girls play video games too, but like generally speaking, guys are more known to do that. Having guy friends, dating girls, those are all very much like guy typical centric experiences, right? But then I have feminine experiences, especially in my current day of my life, which are like female friendships that I have, intense emotions, heightened sensitivity to like all sorts of things in my environment, hooking up with boys. That's another one. Female beauty interests like makeup and, different outfits and styles. And so it's just really that I have like I really see myself as having a wide spectrum of experiences across both groups. But then things took a twist, and this was really great to see. Because they really wanted me to stay in the group, they thought of a third option. And I was kind of wanting to see if they would do this. I didn't want to propose it. Again, I want to see how they're going to take things. It's very much, I'm in the back seat, they're in the driver's seat here. And they came up with an idea. They decided that they could offer me a third option to continue. And that was that they both would be willing to split off from the group for any gender specific dynamics. So like the gendered groups that they're going to have later on in the series counted as part of this. So they were talking about that, but then they were also saying that the prayer at the end of the sessions would be the next thing. So like instead of getting prayed over by the girls, I would just get prayed over by this couple. And that was, I guess, why they were so fast prioritizing that they treat me this way, like so quickly. Like that's why they needed to meet with me so fast, is that in their minds, they needed to funnel me to this third category or the men's right away for prayer, which, okay. Like, again, okay. It was so bad that a woman was praying over me. Okay. Whatever. I mean, again, like I'm in it for them, or like I'm in it to see how this is going. And because I heard such great things about it, but I did think it was really funny that like the actual gendered subgroups don't start out for like a couple more weeks, but here they are. They got to get me now because the prayer at the end was enough to be a problem for them. So it's just like, okay, I get it. Whatever. It's fine. Just, that's my attitude. That's what I keep having to do. It's just, putting away the cognitive dissonance and how I'm being treated. Yeah, I'm getting to be an expert at that. I'm going to be an expert by the end of this. So again, though, I was really grateful that they came up with this. And this showed me that they are really trying to take that energy of that I am valued and I am loved. And that made it a lot less like they were gaslighting me, because they were really putting effort into a solution. And I really appreciated that. So that was kind of the moment where I was able to take some of those, thoughts on it being like that they're mistreating me, and see that they were really being sincere in what they were saying. So that was really great. And I was really happy about that too, because it would avoid the problems of unnecessarily outing me. I mean, it is weird, but like, that I would go with them just for these different things, but at least it kind of gives like open space and doesn't say anything outright about who I am in a way that kind of like disrespects me. And again, I was really happy with that. I was like, okay, this is where a third space makes a lot of sense. And they even admitted right there that it would just be an absolute shocker to everyone in the group that I'm trans. Like, it was very much an understood sentiment that no one really knows this about me, at least in the broad sense, and except for the leaders, like all 6 of those leaders, I think is roughly how many I counted. No, but that, again, there's like a much larger portion of participants that have no idea. And so I really appreciated that they were putting thought into my privacy by this third solution. So I was like, okay, that's good. Yeah, I see it. And then also that takes away the problem of me potentially disrupting group dynamics, which again, because if I'm sitting there with the boys, are they going to really share everything that's on their hearts? I mean, hopefully, but don't know that for sure. So it's like, that's where I'm kind of like, I'm very much glad that we're kind of finding this middle ground solution for me here. And so I'm all for it. So that was it. I was like, I'm taking this option. And that kind of just settled the drama of everything. And we talked a little bit more small talk after that, but really that was the height, the climax of this whole like dynamic and like conflict, really. So from there, the plot, kind of ends, it's over, and then that's it. So we end that and we go inside and, we sit down. I make more small talk with some of the other leaders and participants before the group gets, kicks off really. And then, things kick off and we do go through the same routine of like start with a prayer. We go into a worship song, which is always my favorite part because there's no drama in that moment. It's just you and God and this group. So I like that the most. It's so funny how people are the issue for me so much. But then, we go into the shared dynamic of the people, and they're sharing more things this time. So there's more vulnerable moments, as I like to call them. And that's because we're in session 3. And the themes of these vulnerable moments, again, I'm not going to go into any of them because I'm really going to respect the privacy of the participants and this experience. And the last thing I want is to share anything that anyone would ever be like upset about. But I am going to share about things that are directly related to me. That's the point. This is my emotional journey going through this. And so I'd say like a lot of the theme of what is being shared are things that are insights related to the experience and the homework. Because again, the questions are prompted out of the homework. But themes of like regret or struggle in the day-to-day life, or regret tied to a specific event or decision that somebody made. And so in that sense, there's a lot of parents in the group. So there's a lot of stories about being overwhelmed with your kids and handling that. And that always gets a lot of group energy channeled to it because it's like most of these people are parents. So they're relating to big time to the struggles of young children and handling the stressors of that and daily life and how that just eats at you so much emotionally, because I know it's a grind. Like you can just see it on especially the moms' faces in this group and just in real life. I mean, what mom isn't stressed out by their kids? Come on. Like that, I even resonated with that, and I don't have kids. I was just thinking through like my cats and how stressful that can be sometimes. Like, oh yeah, there's another puke, or oh, they peed on the carpet. Oh my gosh. Like, it's just all those little things that add up when you don't have time to deal with those things. So I thought, a very relatable set of vulnerabilities that are coming out here, and just really great. It's really bringing the group together, and I can see that in real time. And it's making me get closer to sharing. But I think the thing that was, kind of catching me up is that I'm thinking all these things that are being shared are so relatable to people. And like, I'm not a parent myself. So like, even some of those parent-specific things can't really connect with. I mean, I try to look at it from my lens of my cats, but there's about 50-50 with stressors I can relate with and things I can't really relate with in this, in the lessons being shared here. And like, I think it's just going to continue to grow in that direction. Like, I think people are going to share deeper and deeper things as we move forward. And especially when we get into those smaller gendered groups, I think there's going to be a lot of deep vulnerability shared, and I'm excited for that. And like, it just makes me think like, what am I going to share? Because again, like my life now is really just like conflict free aside from this group, ironically. And like, it's so easy. And I'm like, so I guess I'll share things from my past, that otherwise I wouldn't really think about or, deal with on the day to day. But I'll try to like, I don't want to say make them a big deal, because that's like, but that's like the pressure of this group, which is like, again, so interesting to me. But like, yeah, so that's kind of where I want to go with this, but I'm just trying to think like, what is something I regret? And, again, it's about looking at yourself and trying to think about like what maybe mistakes you've made and how God can come in and be a part of that. And like, I don't want to think about how it's not applicable to me, because that's just a mindset of where it's just going to be a barrier to any relatability. And I don't want that. I want to really be in the mindset of everyone else here and thinking about how I can participate in finding things in my past. So it's kind of like that exercise of digging up past traumas. Even though, again, I don't live in that space. That's not something that's part of my day in and day life. But I want to relate with this group as much as possible. And so I'm kind of thinking back to like, what were my struggles with coming out with gender dysphoria, and like how that relates to my autosexuality and all of those elements, because maybe I could share about that. Like, certainly, it led to reckless choices and behavior in college that again, don't really define my day in, day out existence at all now, but maybe I could talk about that and, and give light on how I struggled with that. But it's awkward too, because it's not like Jesus was like the centerpiece of how I navigated those struggles. And how like transition really solved a lot of it for me. It actually solved all of it, except for the fact that I don't love the medical risks long term. But other than that, there's not really anything connected to it that I'm in this moment worried about. And so it's like, all right, I gotta kind of figure out like how I want to share that and like navigate that with these people. So, and then I think what it comes down to, though, something I realized is that I have this way of seeing things that happen, like even negative, distinctly negative experiences in people's lives, and seeing the value in it. And I think I see the value in everything just a little too much, to be honest. Like, because I see the positives and the negatives that come out of that. And so like, even like big struggles, just, you can see how they shape someone. And I'm always going to be biased to seeing that lens, because that's just how I like naturally want to see things. And especially when you share the intimate struggle, like how that opens up and how that connects to the group. And so I just think, again, like, I think part of the problem here right now for me is that my life is just too easy, and that's causing me problems here. So once again, though, like when all is said and done, I failed to speak up at all during the group session. But like always, I was extremely engaged in listening. So I'm still very much participating, just very much mentally and emotionally, and not so much hourly. I'm just not quite ready for that vulnerability, especially after that whole scene with the leaders. I mean, I was just leaving that and I was really just so relieved that was over. I was so happy that was over. But at the same time, I was kind of enjoying that feeling a little too much and wasn't like feeling that motivated to share anything in this space. And so anyways, we go through it and we conclude, and it was great. And then I went over to the leaders and it was fine. But when we actually got down to praying, it was a little bit weird. I mean, again, still better than, I guess, getting prayed over by the guys. That would just be very strange. But they're like, the leaders are praying and they're just overusing my name again. So it's always Skylar, 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 because they're praying to God in like, third person with me, because that's how it like kind of, it's a group prayer session now, because there's two people and, me, and then we're praying to God. And so they're overusing my name. And then like once I think it was only once, they slipped he, him in there. Actually, it was a him because it was talking about me. And that was like, I don't know why it was so jarring to me. I already said like, it's not gonna be jarring, but I know why it's jarring. It's because no one in my life refers to me that way. And so it was just like, oh my goodness, like I'm just like, oh yeah, the he, him thing is now coming up now because they admitting they know I'm trans. And it's just like, again, it's just kind of interesting. But the bummer is that it took away what they're praying for me for like 2 to 3 minutes, which is like a good chunk of this prayer. And so like, I'm just thinking about how they misgendered me and how I don't want to let that get to me, but it's like, I also can't really help that. And so I'm just like working through. And so I'm kind of almost saying my own little side prayer right there. Like, God, help me not be focused on this. But then that means I don't have space to listen to what they're saying. So I'm just like, okay, all right, get through this. And so and then finally the prayer ends. And like, by the time it ends, I'm past it now. And I'm just like, just receive what they're saying to me. Don't let, the way they see me be a barrier, but inevitably it is, because I think what I realized is that I'm not going to be able to thrive in this space. Like, there's just going to be so much additional noise that comes out of the way they're treating me that, like, even with me not going to the guys group, which would have been noise centric already, there's a lot of noise. But I'm thinking, like, maybe as I go through this and I get used to that whole, like, I'm going to be misgendered every time, just get used to that. Like, then it won't be a problem, because then it's like, all right, I'm expecting it. But again, it's like, I'm like already setting this group at a lower standard of like how I'm treated. So it's like, how am I going to really think that anything they're telling me is like, they get me? Like, they don't get me. It already is like, they don't get me, like there's just that problem. It's just a barrier there with that. So it's like, all right, whatever, but part of me doing this experience is to challenge myself and deal with it. And it's part of why this group is so arduous. It's so difficult, because I'm used to living life without any struggles and any problems. And then I'm immersed in this one night a week, and it's like, oh, it's so hard for me in this space because I feel so misunderstood just right off the bat. And I'm like, yeah. And unfortunately, being connected with God in this space is not helping anyone treat me better. And I know this because that's just how this works. Like, you have to be around trans people to understand how they see things, to kind of get a sense of it. And again, I'm not tethered to my identity here. That's why I'm doing this group, but that doesn't take away from the way I'm treated, shaping how I'm feeling about stuff, even though I'm trying to subdue my emotions as much as possible. It's like, I'm still a human. I'm still a person. And it goes a long ways to like understanding the other side of that, which they never asked me what my pronouns I would prefer are. And don't get me wrong, I cringe at the preferred pronoun ritual, but that doesn't mean that the kernel of truth underneath of what led to that ritual being established in the first place is to be completely disregarded either. I get it though. Like, wokeness, I have so many problems with the whole wokeness and elevation of victimhood identity. I think it's disabling and I think it's bad, but it does a disservice to the leadership of the group if they can't appreciate why wokeness ever became a thing in the first place. So that kernel of truth is still something to recognize and understand and appreciate and navigate. So using they, them pronouns for me is probably the best win for a compromise in the situation if they're really latched on to their beliefs, a lot more than I probably am. I mean, I'm latched on to my beliefs about wokeness or being anti-woke, I guess, as long as that means elevating victimhood, because I don't believe in that whatsoever. I think, again, that's negative. So there's certain beliefs I'm latched onto, like transition being a valid thing for certain people. I think that's absolutely true, and I would absolutely speak up for that, despite there being problems with it. But and they probably have but being a Christian and being in ideological settings like this reinforces those core beliefs beyond what I think is healthy, and to the point where you're mistreating people. Like in my situation, I don't want to say it's mistreatment outright, but it's certainly not helpful in bringing me to see their viewpoint. Saying pronouns like that isn't going to make me want to see their perspective. No matter how much I try to kind of gaslight myself and say oh no, it's true for me. It doesn't align with how I'm regularly treated, nor how I really prefer treatment. So there's issues there. So again, it's like I'm just waking up to the reality that I'm not going to be able to thrive or flourish in this space unless I completely detach from core beliefs that I'm not going to detach from. That just would be completely gaslighting my realities. And yeah, so it's a very interesting thing, and it's why I love this experience, though, at the end of the day. Even though I hate it in the moment, I love it looking back and reflecting on it because of how it's forcing me to shape my beliefs and opinions on things that I otherwise might just be wishy-washy about because I haven't been confronted enough with the opposite perspective. So that's where I really feel like I am growing out of this. And needless to say, this experience has been an emotional roller coaster. I mean, from the first unexpected text that I got to all that overwhelming anxiety that followed, I always keep second guessing myself in this. And I think that's something a lot of trans people do. They second guess a lot of interactions and a lot of things. But from that first moment of why are they texting me? Why are they singling me out? Why are they texting me? Why do they want to meet me all of a sudden? And then, was I about to be confronted for being trans? And then realizing, yes, absolutely. It just felt like everything spiraled so quickly. I guess navigating the tension, being in a space where my identity doesn't really fit at all. It's been hard. It's been really hard, to say the least. I guess I've felt outnumbered, misunderstood, and I'm always bracing for some sort of conflict, which is just not great, I don't love that. But again, through all of this discomfort, I do think that I'm experiencing, or my experience is pushing me to see things in new ways and figure things out about myself and about these dynamics that I never first thought that I would see. And and I would be lying if I said I'm not tempted to quit. Every time I'm done a freedom group session, I'm ready to quit. I'm so tempted to do it. And so but I'm still here. I haven't skipped a single one yet. And I haven't decided I'm going to quit. And I'm still trying to hold on to the idea here that there's something valuable for me to figure out in the next session, like always, every single time. So whether I stay or I end up leaving, I think this journey has taught me a lot about myself. First of all, I do think I've learned some resilience. So like my resilience and then my boundaries too. I think I'm seeing that, and the importance of pushing through uncomfortable situations. And so like even when even when I'm convincing myself that it's worth it, it's still I'm always having to do that. I'm always having to convince myself it's worth it. So we'll see where things go. But I think I'm gonna stop here. So thanks again.